Oh, sorry. I didn't know we were live. I just saw that record button here. Actually, there's a tiny spider that was just walking behind my webcam, and I thought maybe it's time to use this thing and see what that tiny little guy is up to and keep a closer eye on it. Talking about keeping an eye, I am glad that we as engineers don't have to use these things to actually find bugs in our code. But imagine if we actually had to use one of these things, going through your code base, logs, and just, figuring out where the bug is. So be creative. Tell me, what do you think? How do you think the world of software would be if we had to actually use one of these to find bugs and issues in our applications? Now, I've already given a lot of hints in terms of what we are actually going to discuss today. But if you still not got it, well, this is what we are discussing today. Hi, everyone. Good evening and good morning. Welcome to another webinar. I'm Atul, your host, also the Senior Developer Advocate at InfraCloud. Today, we are going to be talking about designing observability and monitoring as platform engineers. Now, over the last 7 or 8 webinars, you have seen us discuss a lot about platform engineering. And what we have realized that while we spoke about a lot of different technologies, tools, and platforms over the time, there is one thing that actually essentially helped us to be more productive, and that is observability. And that we thought is one of the things that we would want to touch upon in today's webinar. Now, before we move on, I would like to remind you that if you all are joining in for the very first time, or if you have missed previous any of our previous episodes, you can go and watch these episodes on YouTube. So all you have to do is scan the QR code that's on your screen and go ahead and watch the previous webinars that we have done. And trust me, you will find them exciting. Now, with that out of the way, I think by the time you're seeing this and the previous webinars that you watched, you know that I am probably not alone here today. While I do enjoy talking a lot, but I don't want to be the only person talking. So let me bring upon the guest today. So I'm joined by Prathamesh. Hey Prathamesh, thanks for joining.
Hey Atul, hello.
Great. And I also have a familiar face, Vishal, here as well. Hey Vishal.
Hey Atul. Hey Prathamesh.
Great. So
Hey.
I met Prathamesh. I remember meeting Prathamesh at some of the events last year in Pune. And coincidentally, we actually caught up at Hyderabad airport one morning. I mean, I was just going out of Hyderabad. He was entering. We were on the way, and he just says, "Hey, Atul," and I'm like, "Oh, wow, you're here," sort of. So that's my fun interaction with Prathamesh. But I would like Prathamesh to introduce himself to all our attendees today. So Prathamesh, the stage is yours.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Atul, for having me. So I'm a developer evangelist at Last9. I've been writing software for around 10, 12 years now. And recently I've been dabbling into evangelism, talking about observability, monitoring, how it relates to platform engineering as well, how it relates to site reliability engineering. I maintain some side projects like SRE stories, where I interview folks from the SRE community and share their story as a blog. I have few other side projects with respect to observability wiki, as well as few GitHub projects. So I'll share those links later. But happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion today.
Great stuff, Prathamesh. Even I didn't know that he is a side project king. I didn't know he had so many side projects that he would be actually doing. So great. Thanks so much, Prathamesh, for that wonderful introduction. Vishal, would you like to reintroduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Vishal, founder and CTO at InfraCloud Technologies. Largely dabbling with cloud native technologies nowadays, but have been doing other dev stuff, chef puppet in between, Docker, and eventually here we are. My focus largely is helping customers adopt enterprise, customers adopt open source technologies and scale them. And I'm excited about the talk today.
Great. Thank you so much, Prathamesh and Vishal, for that short and crisp introduction to tell all our audience who you are, what you do. And like always, again, we have a pretty diverse panel, and with different stories, different point of views to everything that we have been doing. Now, platform engineering, has been talk of the town. A lot of teams and organizations have been actually meaning to start their interactions with teams in terms of building platforms. And even in the last webinar, I had mentioned that even at KubeCon, platform engineering was quite a buzz. A lot of interest from the community, a lot of enterprises as well. Now, while a lot of people know about what platforms are and what platform engineering essentially is, a lot of time it so happens that they are aware of all the tools that are required. They know that, okay, this is the tool that I can pick from here. These are the processes that I can take. But then when it comes to actually gluing things together, or, finding that first step, the stepping stone, as they say, it's actually really difficult when you have to implement it. And that is where we realize that gap, and we have been interacting with our customers, with the community at large, to understand what their understanding or knowledge of platform engineering is, and then try to help them to excel at platform engineering. And one of the steps that we took to do this was to come up with a platform engineering reference architecture ebook. Now, the ebook basically helps the teams and organizations who want to start their platform engineering journey, but are not quite clear as to where to start. What are some guidelines or guardrails that you need to follow while you are building your platforms? What are the various tools or processes that you need to implement while you are building an IDP? You would have heard things like golden paths, but how do you build one? And whether do you actually need one? Now, these are some things that are very critical, and based on our interactions, we thought, let us put everything together and help everyone else start their journey. So these are the things that are part of this reference architecture ebook, and you can download this ebook by scanning the QR code that is there on your screen. Now, the book bundles a lot of things. We have had, tens and hundreds of discussions with a lot of people. We have implemented platforms at a lot of place, and we try to bring in our learnings and experience into this book. Now, as they literally say that, I want to pull a leaf out of this book. One thing that I would like to discuss today is the AAA framework that we have presented in the ebook. So whenever you talk about platforms, one of the common things that you will come across are capabilities. Now, capabilities are essentially the services that your platform provides your developers. So, there are certain set of services or capabilities that a platform should have for developers to complete their task or be more productive. So what we did as part of this ebook was we tried to bucket all these capabilities into three different buckets, which is develop, consume, and discover. So develop are all the services, capabilities that a platform provides, which are consumed by the developers directly to build a platform. So you can see things like service templates, workload specifications, progressive delivery or testing infrastructure. These are the things that developers actually need to build their service. Now, while they're building a typical service, there happens that there are a lot of third-party services that they might be using to build that service or an application. Let's say things like message queues, or you talk about database services. Now, these are something that are consumed, and hence these fall into the consume bucket. And lastly, there are some capabilities that help you take your productivity a notch higher and have a more closer look on what your application is actually doing. And that is where you have things like observability, infravisibility, fleet management, so on and so forth. And while we have these capabilities with us, now we need to ensure that this is something that is evolving and not something static. And that is where we came up with overall arching framework called the AAA framework, which is assess, adopt, and accelerate. So we start with the adopt cycle, where we adopt one of the few capabilities that we need, and then we accelerate the whole thing, trying to deploy it on our platform, make it available to the teams, get feedback, and then assess how the adoption has been, and then reiterate on it. So this AAA framework is just one of the things that we have discussed in the ebook. So to know more of everything that we have been doing around platforms and what we have discussed, all you have to do is go and get that ebook. Now, when I started the webinar, I got this tiny little thing with me. It's a magnifying lens. Or for the Gen Z folks, it might be a search icon because that's how they've probably seen this. But essentially, as developers, what happens is when I am developing an application, my focus or my day-to-day interaction is probably with my IDE, or probably with GitHub, or probably with the runtime, or things like that that I'm using. Or maybe if I'm working as a platform engineer, my focus is more around finding the right pipeline, finding the right configuration, doing all the plumbing work. But in this entire process, one thing that we don't give too much attention or too much reward is observability. Without observability or monitoring, anything what we do, either as a developer or a platform engineer, it becomes really, really difficult. And that is where I would lead into the discussion for today, where we have Prathamesh and Vishal who will help us with their insights in taking this through. So, Prathamesh, my question to you is: we discussed a lot about developer productivity and observability. How do you think this impacts developer productivity? What are different areas you feel that affects a developer's day-to-day task?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I think the reason for that is that Vishal will have definitely opinions here, because what has happened over the years is the whole landscape of data has changed massively. There is so much of data that gets generated and thrown at us all the time that a lot of times, instead of thinking about observability, we are actually thinking about the data. That okay, this is the data, and the lens example that you shared is actually perfect, right? Like whenever there is an incident, if you have to like squint your eyes and have a carry a like a big lens and go through all the log lines to understand where things are going wrong, that becomes extremely time consuming. So one of the two aspects from a developer productivity, with respect to observability especially, is how you can handle data, how you can handle data growth, and then at the same time how you can handle consistency and predictability, right? Like a definition of a platform is also where you have consistency, you have reliability, as well as you have basically workflows to manage all of this. And I think productivity in a way goes hand in hand, where uh, just having access to the data, like okay, let's have metrics today, let's have logs today, let's have traces tomorrow, and have coverage with respect to all our services, that will definitely not improve the productivity. I think as engineers and developers, if we focus on workflows, that okay, do I know if my system is degrading? What are the mechanisms that I can get alerted for that? What are the mechanisms that, do I have any redundancy in knowing that as well? Like if I'm not available, is there any somebody else in my team who will get paged for an incident? Is it a degradation? Is it actually a breach? For example, if I have to like stop everything and focus on something that is broken, or is it something that I can live with, right? So all of those like decisions helps in taking care of the productivity aspect, because otherwise it's just too much of data, everything is important for you, and you are just going through the like too many alerts that you have to deal with, and that becomes very tricky, right? So from a productivity perspective, I think at least in my experience, what I've seen is when teams classify their objectives, it becomes easier to manage the productivity. From a perspective of observability, if you think about the two core aspects of observability, that why we do it is basically a radar and a black box. That's my favorite analogy to describe observability. A radar is needed because you want to understand what is happening in real time, so that if something is getting degraded, you can mitigate that incident. Because anytime you are facing a problem, or you're seeing that something is degrading in the system, the first reaction, if it is that okay, let's fix this, by the time you fix this, the customer might have already left your platform, right? And which is not good, because ultimately all our aim is, or all our goals are to provide a better customer experience, which means that if we know that something is going wrong, then first reaction should be that okay, let's mitigate this, right? Let's isolate the problem, let's do the proper customer communication, and solve and mitigate the problem. We always have a black record, like a flight recorder black box, which we can use later for debugging, which will have access to all the information, which can actually help us write an RCA, which can help us find out the exact cause and fix it. But essentially, if we look at how we approach the incidents, how we look at the whole uh, data from a perspective of outcomes rather than just having coverage or just looking at signals of observability, like they're called, I think the first approach is much better, right? And a lot of times observability is considered as like a real-time activity which is only on call, that there are certain alerts, there are certain Grafana dashboards, there are log streams that we have to look at, and that's it, right? It is actually a very clear distinction where there is a wartime observability and monitoring, and then there is a peacetime observability and monitoring as well. And the peacetime is much more important because that helps you reduce the wartime observability that you have to spend a lot of your time on, right? So a lot of times having reviews of how your application is behaving, how the systems are behaving, having able to access that data over long term, having granular access to the data over long term, because it can help you prioritize the features, it can help you prioritize whether we should fix bugs, whether we should focus on new capabilities, or whether we should invest in developing our own platform as well, right? All of these questions actually help in making sure that you look at the productivity not from a lens of, okay, I received 100 alerts today and I clicked acknowledged on 90 alerts, and that is a day well spent, rather than okay, I did not receive any alert because when we received an alert last time, we had taken enough precautions that there is a run book for that kind of a scenario. We don't want to worry about running into the same challenge again, right? So I think it is slightly different from looking at it from a data perspective versus outcome perspective. And a lot of times we focus on single pane of glass, where we see logs, metrics, traces, everything together. We want to see all of that together. But a lot of times what happens is a single pane of information where we can see infrastructure metrics, application metrics, even product and business metrics together plays a very important role. Because the way people manage these systems has also changed, right? Now there is no single sysadmin who is responsible for the uptime, and there is no IT and developers who are only responsible for writing code. A lot of times in organizations these days, there is a single team which is responsible for running a service end to end, which means that the person who is writing an HTTP handler is also responsible for making sure that that HTTP handler runs in production, along with a load balancer and along with a CDN, along with a reverse proxy. And that means that you need to be aware as a team about not just the code that you have written, but how that code is shipped to the production. Are there any business constraints? For example, if you're running a live event, let's say there is a marketing notification that goes out which brings people to your platform, which is good for business, but which means that you need to be aware of those events as well, where you need to be able to scale up, you need to be able to respond to certain indicators that might affect health of your system, right? So as the way we run services has changed, I think the way we look at productivity around observability systems has also evolved. And that's probably my longish take on how you could think about the developer productivity or SRE productivity in the with respect to observability.
No, I think that was a pretty good and pretty detailed answer. I'm sure everyone who is watching this and even Vishal would want to do a plus one to whatever you said. Essentially, the things like you really mentioned a very good point, which I probably never thought of it from that aspect. Was talking about an observability workflow, keeping something of a observability workflow in place, which actually tells me over time how my systems are performing and whether it's degrading over time or not. So that is a key, takeaway for me. And also the wartime versus peacetime observability analogy. I think that's very critical. So those are two learnings for me. Everyone who has joined in, those are the two learnings that I had: observability workflow as well as the wartime versus peacetime monitoring and observability. Do let me know what are your thoughts on what Prathamesh has said in the chat box below, wherever you're joining in from, and we would like to listen to your thoughts as well. Now, moving on to another thing. Now, while I had been doing my preliminary research when it came to observability, and no, my understanding is not just limited to Grafana, because I like that tool, but then there's a wide gamut of tools and processes that comes when you talk about observability. And one thing that I came across, or rather a term that I came across, was observability as a platform. Now, this term actually caught my attention, and I was quite intrigued to know about what is this, and what's this all about. So, I think I would like to take this discussion to Vishal now to share his thoughts on what he feels about the whole observability as a platform and things associated with it.
Sure, sure. So I think if you look at the stack today, right, it's fairly complex, right from your cloud or an on-premise where you're deploying to operating system to then multiple layers of abstractions, and then you eventually have apps sort of, right. And to deal with the level of complexity, I think we need a holistic view of things. And I think if you look at the manufacturing world, there is a term called design for manufacturing, right? You can design whatever complex thing you want, but if you can't manufacture it easily, it's going to be very complicated, right? And I think we as engineers need to look at observability as a way of design your applications to be observable from the beginning. That way, you can actually do it far better when it goes to production and scale it from there, sort of, right? And that means we just can't look at this is somebody else's job. They will monitor and do whatever they want. We need to look at app level what all things I should be start looking at. What are the signals that I should start catching at, right? So I think we need to take an approach of not just deploying some monitoring system and hoping everything just shows up on that, right? We need to look at it from dev, starting from dev all the way to production, and use those signals to then operate and get the feedback, and then use that feedback to make our applications better, basically.
Absolutely. And I think, all the signals that we collect in the entire journey from dev to production would have a different meaning for a different team as well. They might have to respond or react to it in a different way. Prathamesh, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I completely agree to the point that Vishal, you mentioned about being able to make our systems more observable rather than thinking about it as somebody else's problem. Because, like we discussed earlier, right? Like it's a lot of these systems, the way they are run is that even though there is a platform engineering team, there are pods and service owners who are responsible to run their own services, which means they have to care about the entire stack, which involves CDN, load balancer, reverse proxy, application, storage components, and so on. Yes, there can be some shared infrastructure where the ownership is with like DevOps teams or infra teams, but ultimately the way services are run has changed, and it has become more service owner or service team oriented, and that's where being able to make sure that you are able to be consistent with other teams, being able to make sure that you are using the same standardizations that are used by other teams also goes into that platform engineering aspect. And I think there the observability slash monitoring as a platform benefits come into the picture, because everybody has the same level of definition of what availability means. Like I don't have a separate definition of availability that Prathamesh's definition of availability for this webinar is 5 minutes late, and Atul's definition of availability is he will join 5 minutes early, right? That doesn't make sense, because we are working as a team. This is the product that we are delivering to the to our viewers, which means that we have to have the same definition of availability, even if we are joining from two different places, even if we have different stack, even if we use different languages and frameworks, the way we write code, or we use different editors. You need to have consistency, standardization as a platform in your observability as a platform to make sure that the experience that is delivered to the customers is what you have signed for, whatever your SLA is, right? Like today's SLA is probably talk about all of this, which starts at 8:30 p.m. IST. And it has to start at that time. So I think what I meant to focus on is when you think about observability monitoring as a platform, I think the benefits that you get is around consistency and standardization. And the challenges are again the same. You have to maintain that consistency and standardization, because any new microservice that you onboard, ephemeral infrastructure that you deal with, you have to make sure that the aspects of standardization, the aspects of consistency and reliability are maintained, right? And I think one of the biggest factor that you can use to solve this problem is having workflows. Because as you think about workflows are not features, but they actually solve a problem end to end, which can be applied across different technologies, across different stacks, across different teams. And if your observability platform has those workflows, that okay, this is the broad problem that we are trying to solve, which is, let's say, for example, is understanding how our systems are behaving, and the objective is that we should come to know that ourselves rather than our customers telling us, right? Which means that you need to make sure that okay, all services should emit certain metrics, all services should have their own dashboards, all services should have a service owner, all services should have someone who is on call during the business hours, all services should have some redundancy, and all of that, right? So I think having workflows and then thinking about how you can achieve standardization and consistency with those workflows definitely helps in uh, uh, like having observability as a platform. Uh, we'll probably talk about
Yeah,
how you can
do that, achieve
go
that.
about building a platform yourself as platform engineers, or what are some of the points that you have to consider. But I think the biggest 3 points that I would say somebody should consider is like RCA, right? As SREs and DevOps engineers, RCA is something that we are used to, but reliability, consistency, and actionability of everything that we do with observability as a platform, that will definitely help us in making sure that it is meeting the business goals that we are striving for.
Interesting. So, I think Vishal started on the right note, talking about teams, standardization, consistency, and then you talking about getting the workflows right into the mix. So I think, yeah, it's a pretty interesting mix of things when you talk about observability as a platform. And even I have spoken a lot about that. It's not just about tools. It's a lot about getting the processes right. Like Prathamesh spoke about, each service having an owner, each service having a person defined, or a process defined on how it should move. Now, moving on, and I think as per the SLAs, we are well in time. So I think we are maintaining our SLA for the webinar when it comes to the time. So yeah, I think while observability as a platform sounds like a very interesting and intriguing term that everyone would want to jump on it and try to implement it, or get it into place. Uh, Essentially, what happens is that when you actually get into it, you realize that hey, it's far easier said than done, because there are a lot of complexities which are involved when you are approaching something of that scale and that complexity. So Vishal, I mean, since you have seen a lot of probably deployments and things happening at huge scales, what are some challenges that you have observed that teams and individuals should keep attention to, be wary of?
Right. So I think the individual point we kind of covered when we said the developers need to, or every team person on the team need to look at observability as a first class citizen instead of expecting it to be somebody else's job. I think what I've seen at organizational levels is a couple of different things. I think there are the statistics. The cost of observability is between like 8 to 10% of the cost of compute and stuff like that, right? And that is not a small cost. It's a huge cost that companies end up paying. So any small optimization you do there is going to be a huge impact on your bill. And I think post COVID, post ZIRP, everybody's eyes are on the dollar bills. So I think that's definitely one of the big concerns. The other thing I have seen also is whatever works at one scale just doesn't work at another scale. So I have seen companies starting to use like a SaaS platform at certain scale, but then move back to a managed, self-managed kind of observability stack at some point in time. And then after they cross another certain scale, they just can't use the same product that worked for the previous scale. So it's a completely different spectrum of companies I have seen. And I have seen one company kind of go through almost 3 platforms or tools, what you want to call them, throughout their journey of scaling the organization, basically, right? And I think knowing these signals, knowing what is working and what is scaling at what point in time is a little hard, because it's very contextual. There is no simple formula that if I get to this point, I should be using this kind of thing, right? And then obviously the classic decision of build versus buy. You cannot build everything for every scale, but sometimes you just want to buy and start at some point in time. And again, as I said, there is no straightforward answer, unfortunately. So as an organization, to figure out those points and to make that right switch and continue to scale whatever makes sense are probably the biggest challenges, I would say, today in observability landscape that I've seen it with customers.
I think Vishal has actually gone through the previous webinars before answering this, because even in the previous one, he had mentioned that context is very critical. We spoke about platforms, and that's when he told that the context within an organization for a platform actually changes over time. So when the team is small, there might be a different context to a platform, and when the team becomes larger, that's when your platform also evolves and the context completely changes. So I think that's a very good continuation, sequel to what we have done in the previous webinar. Prathamesh, what are your thoughts when it comes to some challenges in building and maintaining such platforms?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And if you look at the whole definition of a platform itself, right, like how CNCF platform engineering paper describes it, I like one term which explains it beautifully, which is golden paths and paved roads, right? You're providing a framework to people where there are standards that you can rely on, which can help you achieve the objective that as a group or an organization that you're looking for from an observability perspective, be it service uptime, be it platform uptime, be it providing certain SLOs and SLAs to your end customers, to other teams within the organization, right? But golden paths and paved roads is, I think, a beautiful definition of how you can think about building such an observability slash monitoring platform, because it takes care of making sure the aspects about standardization, consistency, reliability, and actionability are taken into consideration while building these platforms. In terms of challenges, I think, Vishal, you rightly said about the cost of observability is pretty huge. I have a breakdown of that cost, the way I would like to call it, where C is the cardinality, O is the operations, S is the scale, and T is the toy. Now, very similar to how you have a cap theorem, you may not have all the three at any point of time, all the four at any point of time, but you may have 2 out of 4, which can tilt your decision or influence your decision whether you want to build something on your own, or you want to basically like have something which you can use off the shelf from a managed service perspective. But essentially, the challenge in building a platform boils down to how you manage the data, because almost 70-80% of all of these telemetry data is unused. You emit it in the hope that it will be useful someday, but it is never queried. And I mean, we have stats around that. Like, a lot of our customers also emit so many metrics which are unused, but they have to be stored. While storage is something that is not a problem, because you can store data as much as you want. You can keep adding the data to the storage. Effectively, when you start querying the data, that becomes a challenge. And that's where when you're building your own platform, maybe based on open source tools, you have to take care of understanding what your query patterns would be. That are your query patterns going to be, let's say, only 2 weeks, which is live debugging in a way, right? You don't want operational data to be available beyond 2 weeks, which is great, which means that you can cut down on some of the reliability aspects of this platform. You don't need to worry about having this data available all the time, which means that you can perhaps cut down some of the costs in maintaining the storage components, right? That is something that can influence the tools that you use in making these decisions. Give you an example of, let's say, monitoring system Prometheus, very popular, right? By default, retention is 2 weeks, which is great. But if you want long-term data, then open source ecosystem has tools like Cortex, Thanos, Mimir that you can use, right? Which means that now you can have not one problem but 2 problems. You have to manage Prometheus as well. You have to worry about managing Thanos as well. You have to manage. You have to worry about managing the entire platform as well. So it's not just that with every added capability that you are adding in your observability platform, you have to worry about as a platform engineer. You have to worry about maintaining that as well, right? And sometimes that also plays a very important role in terms of making a decision whether you want to build it yourself or whether you want to buy it. Do you have enough experience in maintaining these platforms? Do you have enough scale to even warrant building an observability platform? If you're just starting, probably just use something like New Relic Datadog as a free plan. That was my way when I started, right? I was writing Rails apps. It was pretty easy to use a Heroku add-on for Datadog or New Relic to get started, because that used to solve the use case at that time for a dummy app or a play app, right? But as your needs grow, as you have to provide customer experience, then it's important, we have to worry about taking some of these decisions based on facts rather than just our opinions. And those facts can be, okay, what are some of the retention policies that we have, what are some of the promise SLAs that we have, that can dictate our decisions in terms of how you go about building the platform. One of the cool thing is that if you are promising 99% SLA to your customers, your observability platform has to be more than that. It has to be at least 99.1, because otherwise there is no guarantee that you will be able to compute 99%, right?
Interesting.
It also,
Interesting.
yeah, boils down to like redundant tasks and so on. I can go on. Yeah, there is a lot of stuff that I can talk
I
about this topic, but
I know
please
that.
take
I
it.
think I'm sure that if I'm doing something on observability specific in the future, probably I know whom to reach out to do a series of a show here. But then you said a very good thing, and as a host of the webinar, I have some powers, and you can see that power scroll on your screen. I really like the line that Prathamesh told, that we configure metrics to hope. Sorry, we configure applications to emit metrics in the hope that we would use it someday. And for some reason, it just struck me. So thanks so much, Prathamesh and Vishal, for that insightful, discussion around the topic. So we touched upon everything, starting from developer productivity, touching about observations, observability, and then looking at the whole observability as a platform approach, and then seeing how the context changes for organizations, the need for standardization, the need for consistency. Do you need metrics, identifying owners? So there are lots and lots of things. And imagine we did all of this in about 38 minutes. So that's so much of things that we discussed in so little time. And I'm sure there's a lot more like Prathamesh told. So we'll move on to the next section of the webinar today. And this is where we are actually discussing about one of the solutions, which Prathamesh brings to the table, which can, help address some challenges or improve our understanding about observability at a large. So, Prathamesh, over to you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Atul. So at Last9, we are building tools for solving some of the challenges that we discussed today. And we look at the whole observability space from the lens of monitoring versus debugging. Atul, we can move on to the next slide. We discuss about this slightly, right? Monitoring is all about having a radar which tells you that what is happening across your system, across all the components, all the services together. This information has to be real time, because only then the radar is useful. If you're like getting hit by a enemy aircraft, and your radar shows that to you after half an hour, by that time you're already gone, right? So radar means that you need this information in real time. This information needs to be available across all the components that you are looking at, which can help you understand where threats are coming from. At the same time, there is debugging, which is all about flight recorder black box. As we had discussed, you have granular data. You need to use that data for finding issues and finding the root cause of the incidents. But very interestingly, how that is used in the aspect of observability is what we'll see on the next slide, where what does monitoring is used for, right? Is to know what is broken, where it is broken. Is it my service? Is it my application code? Or is it a load balancer? Is it a CDN that is having a problem? Is it Cloudflare that is having an outage, versus it is my DNS provider that is having an outage, which can be Cloudflare in both the cases. But yeah, just that example, right? And the North Star here is MTTT, which is mean time to detect what is going wrong. Monitoring is best served by metrics and events in the context of telemetry data. In case of debugging, the questions that we ask is, what is the root cause? What's the fix for this? Can we fix this? And the North Star there is mean time between incidents. So over time, your objective is to basically elongate the time between incidents, increase the MTBI, which proves that your platform is resilient to failures. You don't run into same failures again and again. But that is only possible if you have a lower MTTD, which can help you in isolate issues faster and make sure that they don't happen again and again. From a debugging perspective, logs and traces are useful. From a monitoring perspective, metrics and events are useful. At Last9, we are a monitoring platform. We have a high cardinality metrics and events warehouse. We can move to the next slide. And that is where Levitate, our managed time series data warehouse, comes into the picture. Now, if you look at the whole monitoring space, it is instrumentation, ingestion, storage, query, and alerting, right? And as we discussed workflows earlier, at each of these stages, there is a workflow that can help engineering teams and DevOps teams to manage their data effectively. Instrumentation these days is a solved problem. You have open standards like Prometheus, Hotel, StatsD, and all of that. We are compatible with all of those open standards, which means getting started with Levitate is pretty easy. You can use one of the existing integration and start sending the data. But the real challenge happens in data management itself. And that's where at the ingestion layer, we have a streaming aggregation pipeline, which can help you create different streams of data. And I will show that workflow today, how you can go about it. But these streaming aggregations help you in terms of managing metrics by creating new metrics, by splitting metrics into different shorter streams of data, depending on which particular labels that you want to focus on. For example, an application team is not really interested in what is the K8s pod or container that is running in. They can just get rid of that label and only focus on the data from a service or a tenant perspective. At the storage layer, we have automatic data tiering, which can solve for use cases such as I want to have wartime as well as peacetime data. Peacetime for capacity planning, larger analysis of how the system was behaving month on month or year on year, which can be solved from cold tier. A blaze tier for wartime activities like alerting, where you want to run alerting on a separate path altogether without worrying about how many users are currently watching dashboards and so on. So we have automatic data tiering at the storage layer. On the query layer, we are PromQL compatible, which means you can get started with the same PromQL Grafana interface pretty quickly. And you can create access policies for specific tiers. All alerting workloads should be served from Blaze tier. All Grafana workloads, dashboard workloads should be served from hot tier, effectively solving for read traffic shaping. And on the alerting side, we are trying to solve the challenge of alert fatigue with respect to false positives, where we have certain pattern detection algorithms, we have certain deployment events and configuration changes integrations that can help correlate why an alert has been raised, because that is a natural question when we see an incident. The question is what has changed. Once you identify what has changed, we already have a lot of background information about how to fix the incident, because we have seen that in the past. We are aware of the code, we are familiar with our systems. The tricky question is, okay, what had changed that had led to this? And this events integration helps with that. uh, we can move on to the workflow that I wanted to show. To the next slide. Perfect. I spoke about high cardinality and streaming aggregation. I think that is one of the problem that a lot of engineering teams face. An answer to high cardinality today is that it results into too much of cost. Let's just drop that data. But here I have an example where on the left-hand side, you see the cardinality of a metric, which is 900K, I think 90K. And in the second panel, we see the cardinality of a metric which is streaming aggregated, which is just 273. And you can see the definition of that aggregation rule, where I'm not really interested in all the other labels. My all queries dashboards are based on just the service and tenant label. I can define the streaming aggregation on Levitate without changing instrumentation. My data will be aggregated in real time, so that I can set alerts on this. I can set dashboard. I can use it in dashboards as well, right? And Levitate will take care of running the streaming aggregation in a performant way. This is really the superpower that we power platform engineers and our users with, which helps them in managing their data effectively, and which can unlock different use cases such as not just getting limited by what you can get out of infra monitoring, but also do application monitoring, product level monitoring, or even tenant level, business level monitoring as well. So this is just a quick glimpse of the workflow that I wanted to talk about with respect to how you can manage cardinality with Levitate using streaming aggregation. There are a lot of other things that we do to manage cardinality as well. You can find more information about that on our product. Atul, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so go to app.lastline.io or lastline.io and learn more about what we are trying to solve.
That was pretty crisp and very to the point in terms of what the actual problem around observability and the data is. I think right, like you rightly mentioned, the only when you have data which is clean, which is coming from correct sources, only then is your platform, or sorry, the observability platform that you're building, or a tool that you have, or a monitoring tool, that will give you accurate results. So thank you so much for showing that workflow. And I think Akshay was joined, he actually showed it. He also liked the session quite a bit. So thanks Prathamesh, thanks Akshay. I'm glad you liked this session. Now, I do see there is a question from someone in the chat. So I'm bringing up Vishal again here. And let me see what that question is. I'll probably bring that up on stage as well. And we have, yeah, so here it is. So we have Melvin, who says that platforms are the rage nowadays. It pretty much is. So, is DevOps dead yet? That's a question I get a lot of times, or maybe after the platform is built. So, Vishal, what are your thoughts on this? Is DevOps dead?
I think all of us in the industry are aware of the hype cycles, and things do go through their own rage, for lack of a better word, unfortunately. I think platforms do have value for a certain size and a certain scale of engineering orgs, basically. I think we touched upon this in a couple of webinars ago. If you're a small team, a good README on your GitHub repo is your platform. You don't need a whole lot, frankly speaking, right? But if you're running a software engineering org of, let's say, a few hundred to a few thousand people, I think there is value in that. I don't think DevOps is dead. I don't think DevOps is not going to be dead. COBOL is alive and kicking even now. So we live in that world, I guess.
Yes, I totally echo the thought that you mentioned, that the requirement of a platform actually varies based on your team size, whether it's important or rather required, necessary or not. For a larger team, it might be absolutely necessary. And that was one of the points that we were actually discussing at the platform's working group as well. That. At a point in time, you actually want to just have a TPV, which they call as the thin platform, or just a minimum viable product, which could be as simple as a script. It could be as simple as a wiki doc, because that is the requirement for that team at that moment. But only when you scale is when you realize the true benefits that a platform brings. So I hope, Melvin, you got an answer. While platforms are here to stay, DevOps is not going anywhere. It's absolutely going to be there. Like Vishal said, a lot of systems with COBOL are still around. So don't worry, DevOps is here to stay. So yeah, I think keeping up with the SLA of the webinar, we are right at the time, and we have had a wonderful discussion today. Just to quickly sum things up, we started talking about how observability affects each one of us, whether we are a developer or a platform engineer. And then, how workflows are necessary. And it's not only about having the, metrics, logs, and alerts in place, but then having a workflow that actually tells me that my system is degrading, over time. And then when we touched upon the concept of observability as a platform, that is where, Vishal mentioned about how the context of a platform changes across the organization, and based on that, you have the right standardization that you need, the right consistency that is required, and then bringing in the right people for everything. Prathamesh rightly called out that when you have services, you have different teams, you need to have processes in place as well. And lastly, we looked at Levitate and how it helps address the problem of data that is coming from various sources. Because eventually, if that is not right, any tool, any monitoring platform that you're building or using with that data is not going to help you a lot. So yeah, that's pretty much what we had in today's webinar. Prathamesh, any last final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think awesome discussion. Really enjoyed it, and I think yeah, I think the points that we discussed about having consistency, reliability, I think they really sum up the discussion. Where if you're building an observability platform, um, uh, think about some of the things that we discussed today, and then maybe take an informed decision.
Yeah, and Prathamesh actually mentioned that he meant to say that if you're building an observability platform, think about him, think about this webinar when you are building one. So thank you so much,
Okay.
Prathamesh and Vishal, for being a part of this webinar today. It was a wonderful discussion. We had quite a few questions coming in from the audience. So thank you, audience, for your comments and interaction as well. And yes, with that, we come to the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining in. And once again, if you or your team is planning to build a platform or want to learn more about platforms, do check out our ebook. You can, download that by scanning that little QR code there. And we would be coming back again with another wonderful session on platform engineering. So keep your eyes on our social media channels. Follow all of us, and yeah, we'll see you again around next time. So until then, have a good time, have a great day, and I'll see you on the other side. Until then, bye bye.